Strategy and Insider, exploring future trends and their impacts.
Welcome to a new episode of the Strategy and Insider podcast. I'm Thomas, your host and a partner at Strategy and. Today, I'm joined by two exceptional guests from one of the world's leading medical universities and a pioneering startup. Together, they are making strides in reducing both the cost and the controversy surrounding stem cell production. We're currently in their office in Stockholm, Sweden, near the very famous Karolinska Institute and the Karolinska University Hospital. And I just had the privilege of touring their local production facility prior to this recording, which was really incredibly insightful. So first, thanks for having me seeing the production facility, but also a very warm welcome, Professor Dr. Katarina Le Blanc and Dr. Mattias Bernow. I'm really thrilled to explore the world of stem cell research with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here and inviting us to your podcast.
Katarina is one of the world's leading experts in the field of stem cell research, dedicating over 20 years to this groundbreaking area of study. Her primary research is on mesenchymal stromal cells, shortly abbreviated also as MSCs, which are derived from adult bone marrow and have the advantage of being undifferentiated, meaning that they can develop into multiple different cell types. She is a professor of clinical stem cell research at the renowned Karolinska Institute in Stockholm and has an impressive portfolio of more than 200 peer-reviewed publications and review articles. She also serves on various prestigious committees, including the Pontifical Academy for Life in the Vatican, the Academia Europaea, the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, and even the Nobel Assembly at the Karolinska Institute. Additionally, Katarina has received numerous accolades for young female researchers and her outstanding work on the immunological properties and therapeutic applications on MSCs. In 2021, Katarina made a significant impact by donating her extensive research from over 2 decades to co-establish Cellcolabs, which is a biotechnology company focused on producing high-quality stem cells on an industrial scale, aiming to make these innovative treatments more affordable in the end. And this brings me to my second guest today, which is Mattias Bernow, who is the CEO of Cellcolabs. He is an MD from Karolinska and a Master of Science from the Stockholm School of Economics. Additionally, he has worked both as an ER physician at Karolinska University Hospital and as a management consultant before launching his first company in the digi-physical health sector called Doctrine. So Mattias brings a unique blend of medical expertise and business acumen to the table, which seems to me to really be a perfect fit with Katarina's background and expertise for the success of Cellcolabs. So, Katarina and Mattias, it's really a genuine pleasure to have you both with us today. Thank you for welcoming me and my team to your Stockholm office. I'm really appreciating you take the time to sit down with us here today.
Thank you, Thomas, and welcome to Stockholm.
Yeah, so it's actually treating us very nicely outside. Yes, it's a little cold. Yes, there is a bit of snow, but it's super sunny. Yeah, so a perfect day to get this recorded, actually. So, Katarina, you have more than an impressive track record in stem cell research, as I was alluding to before. When you think back how you got into this field, what was kind of the spark that set your scientific passion on fire for this very specific research area? And since you started that quite some years back, what have been the biggest advancements that you've seen during your time in stem cell research?
Well, I think a lot was just serendipity and chance. And what I was really looking for as a young hematologist in training was a research area that would be a little bit small and unique, with little competition, as a good venue to explore. And little did I know that the field would explode within a few years of my starting the research. And looking back, I think what I would not have expected was the fact that I experienced bringing in a new field, understanding how that field works. The cells, we applied the cells to patients. Over 2 decades it took to figure out what the cells actually do in the patient, what the mode of action is, and then see all the research translated into a clinical therapy that is now approved by regulatory agents in both the United States and in China and Japan.
And would you have expected that 20 years back? I mean, you said you didn't know and you didn't kind of plan for this field positively to explode, right?
I don't think it's possible to have that as a goal. You go in and you do your little things day by day. And then at the end, looking back, what you achieved is a nice story. But while you're there in the middle of it, you're just there to answer the daily questions.
Yeah. And it's loaded with also frustration sometimes, I can imagine.
Absolutely,
and
a lot
things
of
happening
setbacks.
not the way you planned it, right? So
Not the way you planned it at all. But also the good things were not really planned.
yeah. So in hindsight, there is a good story. But when writing the story, it's not always easy. Yeah, so
it's not always easy, and you don't see the forest for the trees. You're just busy with the little questions.
So Mattias, I can actually very much relate to your story, as we both come from a similar background, studying medicine, then turning towards consulting. So naturally, I'm also intrigued what in your case prompted you to begin your career in consulting after earning your MD, and what motivated your transition back into medicine in the end?
Well, a very broad and general interest in doing good and making things better. I started out as a business student. I found that fantastic. This was in 2001. At that time, everybody was going to London to become bankers. I come from a family of doctors from a town in the southern part of Sweden, and I didn't foresee my future as a banker. So I started at Karolinska instead. From day one, I loved the university and becoming a doctor, though I had very much in common with the fairly extrovert business students that were very entrepreneurial. So I kept hanging out with them while studying at Karolinska in some kind of manic episode. I ended up with double degrees. That was never my intention, but it's been a stroke of luck for me in life. I've been able to move in between those two worlds. Spent 7 years as a clinical physician, as you mentioned, in the ER at Karolinska and in family medicine around Sweden and Norway. I spent my time as a management consultant with Boston Consulting Group before kind of finally finding my way home as an entrepreneur, building one of the finest companies within digital physical health in Sweden, Doctrine, before I was recruited to become the CEO of Cellcolabs. So a stroke of luck, I would say.
That's actually a good lead-on, because I'm wondering how the two of you met, actually. And can you probably share a bit of the story around why this match happened then? And you ended up being the CEO of Cellcolabs, and you are kind of donating all your protocols and the experience into Cellcolabs. Probably if you can take us a bit part into that journey.
So what we were doing in the research group was doing academic clinical trials, and funding is always limited. So we were limited to doing small trials, and we did one after the other. But once we had completed a trial, we needed to do a small clinical trial in another area because we could never expand the research beyond the early trials. And really what happened with the pandemic, we did a clinical study in COVID ARDS, the inflammatory pulmonary complications of COVID. And in the trial, we were supposed to have, I think, 11 patients. And what ended up being was that we only had cells enough for 9 patients, so we couldn't even complete that small trial. And I think that was the turning point for me when I decided that we need help in advancing for later stage trials and getting the treatment out for patients. And that's when I met Mattias.
Yeah, and the connector between us was actually the investors behind Cellcolabs, who knew Katarina since before, and realizing the huge opportunity in the world, not having Katarina's cells being registered as a product yet, but seeing the enormous amount of research going on worldwide on mesenchymal stem cells. There were hundreds, or there are still hundreds of ongoing trials on different indications, confirming again and again a very beneficial safety profile, and then also showing the effects of the cells, which we can come back to. So they were understood that there's a huge potential. The frustration from Katarina of not, even though you're one of the world-leading experts and most well-renowned professors of clinical stem cell research and mesenchymal stem cells in specific, when even you could get enough cells for your trials, that was a problem. And a problem that is something that entrepreneurs love, because then there is something to solve and build a company around. And then I was recruited. And on my part, I came from having done a couple of years or 5 years by then as an entrepreneur with my double background. And when I heard about this, it sounded too good to be true. So I needed really to make a deep dive and understand what are mesenchymal stem cells, how do they work, what is the market potential. And I was just blown back. It was an amazing thing. So I needed to go home. I was 5 years into my entrepreneurial journey with my first co-founded startup, asking my wife, who was pregnant with our second child at the time, "Dear, I know that I've done a startup journey for 5 years. It's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but now there's something that is just amazing. But there are some problems and we need to solve them, because this may be a big changer for healthcare and health around the world." And of course, she said yes.
Luckily, yeah.
Now, very luckily. Now we're here. 3 years later, our son Oscar was born 3 weeks after I started as CEO. He's +2 standard deviations in terms of length and weight, so he's a very big guy. And I think Cellcolabs has been growing even faster than Oscar. It's been 3 amazing and crazy years.
And is it then also kind of that experience, Katarina, that you made during that COVID time when you were lagging kind of stem cell material to really apply to patients, that by and large your mission of Cellcolabs is then to increase availability of those stem cells and also do that at a bigger scale and lower costs? Would that be kind of, in simple terms, what Cellcolabs is striving for, or how would you qualify your mission?
So what I did when I understood our limitation and was really frustrated by the limitation, and the founders of Cellcolabs approached me, is I actually donated all my protocols and all the research that I had done for the benefit of being able to reach out to more patients.
That was a fantastic starting point of Cellcolabs and our unfair advantage in the world, because yes, we're by now 3.5-year-old startup, but the startup built on 25 years of research coming out of one of the finest research institutions in the world by one of the most well-renowned professors. So based on Katarina's research, the goal of Cellcolabs is to truly democratize the access to mesenchymal stem cells, knowing what they can do and their potential. The problem, though, as Katarina is describing, there is a lack of cells, they're extremely expensive, and then of course there's also a challenge with a lot of the regulatory frameworks, which hinders the research to advance from phase 2 to 3 and a registered product.
Yeah.
So there are roughly 10 approved products around the world, but there could be maybe 50 or 100. And that is why we exist. That is why Katarina donated her research, and it's to accelerate research. And our contribution to that is supplying the highest quality cells, being one of the most researched protocols in the world by Professor Le Blanc, and also making them not only available but affordable, because that is also, I mean, financing of research is a big thing.
Absolutely, it is. And I mean, now coming from that inflection point also for you personally from that study, right? 3.5 years fast forward, and I had that pleasure of walking through the Cellcolabs production site. You're actually producing 1,500 doses of stem cells per year, with the support from dozen young, healthy bone marrow donors that I learned should be around the age 18 to 25. So me not qualifying for it anymore. But could you explain to us a bit what is the basic concept of those mesenchymal stem cells and their advantages, and also what are most promising applications in patient treatment already today, but also to come?
So in the field, we actually don't call them stem cells. The acronym MSC was initially describing stem cells, but we know today that the cell's role in the body is to direct tissue to a healing situation, but they're not actually replacing lost tissue by themselves. They're just sort of orchestrating healing. That is why the acronym is usually today referred to as mesenchymal stromal cells. The concept of stem cells is complicated.
And there is a discussion on renaming them again to medicinal signaling cells. So MSC is a right acronym and the easiest way to talk about it. But as Professor Le Blanc says, in orchestrating the healing functions, as described, medicinal signaling cells is on the table right now.
It's probably the best description of what the cells do in vitro or in vivo. As far as clinical applications, if we look in the world where MSCs have been approved, we have transplant complications, what we call graft versus host disease, or GVHD. And that's been approved now in China and the United States, but it's also for the last 7 or 8 years, been approved in Japan and also in Canada and New Zealand. Besides that, there is a large interest today in the prevention, not just treating disease, but preventing disease. And there are promising results in cardiovascular disease area, for example, preventing stroke and myocardial infarction, heart infarction, and also testing in improving and treating Alzheimer's for disease.
If you ask me, there's a long list of super interesting indications, and sitting here with Professor Le Blanc, the number one would be graft versus host disease, which is how Katarina and your peers broke the field open for MSCs. Published in Lancet 2004 and then again to 2008, showing that those who suffer from GVHD and don't respond to cortisone, at least 50% of them could be saved using mesenchymal stem cells, saved from dying. That is now a registered indication in several countries around the world. Then one of my personal favorites is cardiovascular disease, where the cells have shown amazing benefits. I often quote one of my favorite trials, which was actually on heart failure. So in that trial, big phase 3 trial conducted in the US, they injected the cells into the heart muscle, hoping for the heart to move better. And it didn't. So in that term, it was kind of a failed trial. But as a secondary outcome, they measured the risk and the incidence of heart infarction and stroke. And the incidence of heart infarction, it decreased by more than 50%, up to 63%. And for those of you who are not medically trained, that's a crazy number. When I meet a person in the ER who's just suffered the first heart infarction or have a cardiac disease, I give that person 5 medications, statins, beta blockers, and 3 more. And for each medicine that I give that person that they need to take between 1 or 2 times per day, I hope that the risk decreases for heart infarction by 5 to 10%. This was a one-time injection with 1 dose of bone marrow-derived mesenchymal stem cells that over 2.5 years decreased the risk of heart infarction by more than 50%. What is even more amazing or strange, but when you know why, it's just fantastic. In that same group, the risk of stroke also decreased by more than 50%. And that goes back to what we talked about earlier, how the cells work and what Professor Le Blanc said. The cells, when injected into the heart muscle in this trial, they don't engraft and become heart muscle cells. They don't transmit DNA or anything else. What they do, they listen to the signals in the body, either in the bloodstream or in the extracellular vascular fluid, and then they respond to those signals, sending out small messengers. And that is also how they can pass the blood-brain barrier, for example. So at the end of the day, they could probably have been given IV instead of injecting them into the heart muscle. That was just a very cumbersome way of delivery. So cardiovascular disease, big area of interest. Musculoskeletal disease, there is a lot of research, not only on bone marrow, but other origins of the mesenchymal stem cells as well, where the cells have shown to decrease pain and in some cases even heal or a regrowth of cartilage, which is super difficult normally. Then you have all the inflammatory diseases, whether it is skin diseases or if it's bowel diseases. Super interesting research going on neurodegenerative diseases. Still very early, once again confirming the safety profile. And then there's a long list of following diseases. And also at the end of that long list, there's a huge interest from the longevity scene and people who want to work preventatively.
Probably coming back to, there is a long list, an even longer list of potential positive applications. MSCs could be, on the list for or in consideration. Still, and I've seen the production facility, a lot of people with very cost-intense machines, with cost-intense materials that you need for it, right? They are still costly and also must face also some supply and quality challenges. Cellcolabs does claim to reduce the costs by up to 90% actually, which would be great, while at the same time also upending the large-scale production. Can you share a little how you plan to operationalize that? How do you get kind of the positive cost effects and at the same time scale up?
Absolutely. The rocket science, or in this case stem cell science, has already been done by Katarina and your group over the past 25 years. Manufacturing stem cells, MSCs, medicine signaling cells, is in one way it's extremely complicated in every step of the production process, from selecting the optimal donor, extracting the cells using the right technique, transporting them in the right way to our clean room facility, extracting the cells from the bone marrow or tissue of origin, then farming the cells, making them grow in a nice way so that they preserve their potency every time they divide, and then at the end of the day cryopreserving them, so freezing them down to minus 150 degrees or below, which then makes them an off-the-shelf product. And then from there, you need to transport them to the patient in need or the child, wherever it may be around the world. Then you need to thaw them, wash them, check them for sterility and viability, make sure they're as happy as they were when they were extracted, and then inject them in the right way in the patient. So it's a super complex process. At the end of the day, the rules of economies of scale, they apply on us as well. So if you do something and you become an expert in every little part, in every detail, you make sure that you keep the quality, you can make it bigger, faster, and at a lower cost. And that is the game that we play every day. How to maintain at the highest quality level in the world while getting a bigger output at a smaller or lower cost. And we have now our own big R&D team, and we're very happy to share Professor Le Blanc's research so we can build on that. So the first step was, of course, doing the tech transfer of what Katarina was already doing and the Karolinska University Hospital was already doing. We did that. We scaled it up by more than 100 times. We validated the process. We applied to the Swedish Medical Products Agency, the Swedish FDA equivalent, for an approval, and they approved both us using the bone marrow tissue and producing the cells according to GMP, according to Katarina's protocols. And by doing only that, I think we cut prices by more than 50%. So that was our get-go, really. And now our aim is from that 50% price reduction to slash prices another 80-90% over the next decade, working on the next production techniques, always staying true to our academic origin and making sure that we get everything right, never compromise on quality while we scale up.
Yeah, and I've seen it now, right? Also, the lab manager was talking about everybody who is working in the production is always thinking, how can we improve each individual step? How can we smoothen the process? How can we speed up the process? How can we take out risk in the production facility? So that's probably kind of the heart of innovation, and also bringing down costs while scaling at the same time. Probably, Katarina, another area to dive into is a bit of ethics, right? Because stem cell research obviously is as regulated and rigorously regulated as chemical drugs and others, which is obviously super crucial for patients and participants and their safety. While this stringent regulation can make the process obviously longer and more cost intensive. It is part of the special responsibility when being active in a crucial area as we are in healthcare. So could you discuss, Rogi, the potential also ethical considerations that are associated with it, with stem cell research, and how the industry by and large is addressing this?
So some stem cells, like embryonal stem cells, are controversial because they're made from fetal tissue.
Yeah.
And also other types of stem cells, like the iPS cells, are controversial in the sense that they're genetically modified cells. MSCs, not necessarily being stem cells at all, but it doesn't matter whether they fulfill the criteria of stem cell. The only thing that's really relevant is what they can do in the patient and what they can achieve. But they're harvested from healthy volunteers, so the donor will actually want to donate cells, so there's no controversy there. And second, we're not genetically manipulating the cells, so they're natural cells. And I think that's one of the reasons behind the extreme safety profile that we have, with nearly no side effects to the treatment. It's very safe. And that makes MSCs uncontroversial compared to other types of cells.
And where do you find those healthy, rather young volunteers that want to donate their bone marrow cells?
I think that's a question for Mattias, but the important thing is they're not so hard to find.
That's interesting. Mattias, where do you find it then?
Well, just like you can find donors for blood for healthcare, there are a long line of voluntary donors for bone marrow for pharmaceutical production, and which is what we do. But as you know, there's also a long line of donors for much more bone marrow for people who are in need of bone marrow transplant, which is a separate thing from what we do. In comparison, we take 5% of what is needed if you do a bone marrow transplant. So we take a very small amount. It's done under local anesthesia, so it doesn't hurt. What it does take, it takes quite a lot of time because you need to undergo an immense screening to be selected, making sure that you're in full health, that are no known, or as far as possible, no unknown unknowns either.
I also learned, by the way, that you must not have visited selected countries before getting that donation, right? It's really highly regulated.
It's a thorough list. We're regulated by the Swedish National Law, by the European Tissue Directive, by the International Society for Stem Cell Therapy, and of course by the Le Blanc protocols. So it's well, if you pass to become a donor, you're truly fortunate. There's a saying that health is the new wealth, and our donors, they're very wealthy.
And I mean, Katarina, you have the pleasure of having worked in this field for give or take 25 years, right? You've seen it starting, you've seen it growing, you know where it is by heart now. When do you think MSCs kind of will be seeing their prime time being used at a very large scale for diseases, but also for preventing diseases at some point? What would be your best kind of guess?
You always look forward. So we know some about treatment. We know very little about prevention. Preventative trials are more difficult to achieve. They take longer before you have results. It costs more money to do a trial in prevention. But I would put my money on the prevention side.
Okay.
I think that's where the big benefit will be.
Super interesting. And on regulation, I mean, some countries do allow already more freely to use it. Others are more hesitant to do it. I mean, how can regulation keep up with it? Because they also need to understand the science behind the possibilities that come with it, and obviously regulate for it at the same time, but also allow for innovation and allow for patient benefits. How do you see this?
I think it's been an experience for also the regulatory bodies. And during these 25 years, they've learned about the cells and the science. And I think today they're up to date on knowledge. But it's been a learning curve with them alongside the development in the field.
I would say that the regulatory authorities, they're up to date on knowing what it is, but then it's a very slow process to change the regulatory frameworks.
When do you think this is also coming to Europe then? Or is there too many hurdles? Is it too expensive? Why not Europe yet?
Well, we're here as well. We're already in Europe. We're supplying to European, one of the finest university hospitals. That's a great story, by the way. We're now supplying to a phase 1 trial for them, but they initially approached us on a phase 3 trial where they came into the exact same situation as Katarina, where they did the phase 1 and phase 2 trial, and then they ran out of cells because the university hospital labs, they're amazing. They can produce the cells, but then they also produce a lot of other stuff for individual patients. They cannot scale and do thousands of treatments. So we're working now on together with that national FDA in that country to be the supplier of the phase 3 trial, even though we didn't supply for the phase 1 and 2 trial, and that's looking very positive right now. Cellcolabs ourselves, we had our first approved trial in Sweden just a few weeks ago, which will be a blood sampling trial following up people who have done stem cell treatments around the world, whether it is cells produced by us or by others. So we're very proud of that trial in Sweden that we're setting up right now. So we're doing research here as well.
But that's great to hear that it's really kind of at a global level, not everything you do on your own, but you're collaborating a lot with other biotechs, medtech companies, and so on and so forth.
I think what we try to do is further the knowledge and the science. So doing this within clinical trials that will constantly teach is key, is very important.
And follow the science is probably also a good key word for me, because I was mentioning at the very beginning, Katarina, that you have the extraordinary honor to serve also on the Nobel Assembly at the Karolinska Institute. Probably jumping into the future of the Nobel Prize Award celebrations, the year 2030, 32, whatever, 5 to 7 years from now. In healthcare by and large, what do you think could qualify for Nobel Prize winning? So what will we have seen as advances in medicine and healthcare?
I think I need to keep that to myself. I would like to see medicine advancing in the field of prevention. There's so much effort in treating disease, and so much of the healthcare budget goes into treating already existing diseases, and there's very little on prevention. And I think promoting, as Mattias said, longevity and healthy life, not just being alive, but really quality healthy life, is our new big task for the future.
And I would say, looking at the major trends around the world, and me not being part of the Nobel Assembly, so I have no idea what they talk about and what they work on. But what is often acknowledged is the basic research behind the big breakthroughs. So the godfather of MSCs, Arnold Karplan, he died sadly last year. But his disciples, there are a handful of them around the world that has really developed the field of MSCs. And given what I believe about their potential for medicine, healthcare, and general health, I would guess it's an interesting field to bet on. The question is, when will we get there? So there are a handful of people that would be possible to get or share such a prize. I'm looking at one of them.
So really, I mean, the only thing that I can say at the end of it, big thanks. Big thanks for a very rich conversation around the science behind MSCs. And what really stands out for me is that it's in the end the orchestrator of healing. It's not the healing itself, but it's the one that kind of builds the ecosystem in the body to get the healing. Yeah. Also, thanks for the great mission that you have at Cellcolabs from a societal perspective, but also sharing it here so openly with us, with me. And also thanks for not just talking, but letting us see it, and being part of your production facility today. And I can only wish you all the very best for the years to come. And again, thanks for hosting us here in Great Stockholm today.
Our pleasure.
Our pleasure. Thank you for coming here, and thank you.
So thanks everybody for tuning in to today's Strategy and Insider podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Please do also tune in next time, which I'm sure will be equally exciting. But until then, stay safe and see you soon.
Strategy made real.